It was a Monday morning in Chicago, the kind of morning that tricks you into thinking life is ordinary. The air was light, the traffic slow, and parents were doing what parents do, rushing to drop their kids off before work. But within minutes, that calm would split in two. A single gunshot would echo through the South Loop, and a young mother would collapse beside her car, her son just steps away from where it happened. Her name was Romeca Meeks. She was 31 years old, a woman who had no idea that on that quiet morning, someone she knew would pull a trigger that would end her life. Before we go deeper, make sure you like, subscribe, and click the bell. This is Roped Crimes. This isn't one of those random street stories. This wasn't about a stranger lurking in the dark or a robbery gone wrong. This was personal, painfully personal, the kind of story that doesn't just happen in alleys or empty parking lots. It happened in daylight near a school, surrounded by parents and children who will never forget that sound. September 8th, 2025. The clock was ticking toward 8 a.m. when Romeca pulled up near her son's school, the South Loop, Chicago, the 2200 block of South State Street, not far from Cermak Road. It was routine. Drop him off, head to work. A few minutes, then she'd be on with her day. Romeca had always been described as a devoted mom, the kind who made sure her son's bag was packed, his uniform straight, his day ready before hers even began. There was nothing unusual that morning. She parked, walked him toward the gate, hugged him goodbye. Then she turned back toward her car. That's when witnesses say the arguing began. It was another woman, someone who wasn't a stranger. Her name was Quadajah Holly Johnson. The two women shared a connection to the same man, Carlos Losos Way, the father of Romeca's son. According to reports, the relationships between them had been tense for a while. Words had been exchanged before, but no one expected it to end here like this. The argument grew louder. Witnesses remember raised voices, heated words, then chaos. Some said the man Carlos was there trying to separate them. One claimed he had Romeca in a hold right before the gun went off. Others said the struggle was mutual. The details vary, but one thing is certain. In that moment, Quadajah Johnson reached for a gun. The shot was fired at close range. A single bullet hit Romeca in the face. She collapsed instantly. The sound echoed across the block, one sharp, deafening crack that cut through morning noise. Parents froze, children screamed, people ran in every direction, and within seconds, the ordinary school morning had turned into a nightmare scene, one that played out under a clear Chicago sky. By the time police arrived, it was too late. When the first officers arrived on scene, the chaos was still fresh. The call had gone out just minutes earlier, reports of shots fired near a school in the South Loop. Parents were still crying, some holding their children, others frozen where they stood, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. Romeca Meeks was lying beside her car on the pavement near the 2200 block of South State Street. She'd been shot once, point blank. Paramedics rushed in, working fast, but there was nothing they could do. Within moments, she was pronounced dead. The shooter didn't run. Quadajah Johnson stayed at the scene, her weapon visible, waiting for police. She told responding officers she had a concealed carry license. She claimed she fired in self-defense. That statement would shape everything that came next. Detectives cordoned off the entire area. Yellow tape stretched across the block. Squad cars lined the street. The sound of radios filled the air. Parents who had been nearby were questioned immediately. Their children were ushered away from the scene as quickly as possible, some still crying, some asking what had happened to the lady by the car. As the investigation began, police confirmed what many already suspected. This wasn't random. The victim and the shooter knew each other. They were connected through a man, Carlos Way, who, according to witnesses, had been there moments before the gun went off. Some accounts claimed Romeca and Johnson had been arguing for several minutes before things escalated. Others said it all happened too fast to follow. One woman told police she heard shouting, turned around and saw Romeca fall. Another described seeing Johnson's arm raised, then the flash of the gun. Reporters began arriving within the hour. News crews gathered outside the tape, microphones ready, but police said very little. They only confirmed a domestic-related shooting and a woman pronounced dead at the scene. Behind that statement was a tangled story. Romeca Meeks, just 31, was a mother. She'd left home that morning to drop off her young son, unaware that someone she knew, someone she'd seen before, would be waiting nearby with a gun. What triggered the confrontation remains uncertain. Some reports mentioned prior disputes between the women. Others referenced tension surrounding the father of Romeca's child. There were even claims, not yet officially verified, that restraining orders had been filed between parties in the months before. But police never publicly confirmed those details. What they did confirm was that Quadajah Johnson cooperated with officers on scene. Her firearm was recovered. She was taken into custody and questioned. As investigators pieced together what happened, they reviewed witness statements, surveillance footage from nearby buildings, and traffic cameras covering the block. The shooting had taken place just steps away from a school zone, a fact that made the case even more disturbing. Children had been present. Some had seen it. The timeline was short but brutal. Between 7:45 and 8:05 a.m., what began as a normal school morning had turned fatal. Within 20 minutes, news of Romeca's death was spreading across social media. Photos of the scene circulated quickly. Police cars, flashing lights, and the body of a young mother who never made it home. By noon, local media identified her by name. That afternoon, investigators described the shooting as domestic in nature, words often used when the violence stems from personal relationships, not strangers. They didn't call it a murder. They didn't call it an accident. They called it a situation still under investigation, and that phrasing, under investigation, left a city full of questions. In the hours after the shooting, the 2200 block of South State Street was still blocked off. Detectives from Chicago's Area 1 Command arrived to document everything: shell casings, trajectory marks, and statements from anyone who had seen or heard the argument. Traffic was backed up for blocks. News helicopters hovered above, capturing wide shots of the flashing lights and police tape cutting through the morning. By early afternoon, the name Romeca Meeks was everywhere. A 31-year-old mother shot and killed after dropping her son off at school. The public couldn't understand it. It wasn't gang-related. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't some random act of street violence. It was something more complicated and more personal. The suspect, Quadajah Holly Johnson, was taken to a nearby station for questioning. She told detectives she fired in self-defense. According to her account, Romeca had attacked her first during an argument involving the child's father, Carlos Losos Way. Johnson claimed she feared for her safety and fired once to protect herself. But investigators had more to look at than words. Witnesses had offered conflicting statements. Some said the two women were shouting before a physical struggle began. Others said they saw no clear threat to Johnson before the shot was fired. A few described the moment in fragments: a brief scuffle, a raised arm, then the gun going off. The man at the centre of it, Carlos Way, was also questioned but was not detained. Forensics processed Johnson's gun. She did have a valid concealed carry licence, something she mentioned immediately when officers arrived. Police photographed the scene, recovered the casing, and collected nearby security footage. The next day, September 9th, 2025, Chicago police confirmed publicly that no charges had yet been filed. The case, they said, was still under review. Reporters pressed for answers. Was it self-defense? Was it murder? Why was the shooter not behind bars? Police refused to speculate. Behind the scenes, prosecutors from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office began reviewing the evidence. They needed to determine whether Johnson's self-defense claim matched the evidence and witness accounts. It wasn't a quick process. Every second of the confrontation mattered. Who moved first? Who reached for what? How close they were? What threats were made? In the meantime, public interest grew. Photos of Romeca, smiling with her son, circulated online, alongside the story of what happened outside that school. Many couldn't believe it. A young mother gunned down at drop-off, and the shooter claiming self-defense. Over the following days, police interviews continued. Detectives re-interviewed several witnesses, hoping to clarify the sequence of events. One mentioned that Romeca and Johnson had known each other for some time through social circles linked to Carlos Way. Another said there had been prior tension between them, arguments, social media posts, and alleged warnings, though much of that remained unverified by law enforcement. Still, One thing was consistent in every report: the confrontation had been brief. It started and ended within moments. There was no chase, no drawn-out struggle, just an argument that turned fatal in under a minute. By the end of that week, authorities confirmed that the case was being treated as domestic in nature. They emphasized that it involved people who knew one another. No random attack, no mystery suspect on the loose, just 3 people whose lives were tied together, and one moment that could never be undone. But even with that clarity, there was silence on the biggest question. Would anyone be charged? As days turned into weeks, no formal charges were announced. Johnson was released pending further investigation. The public was divided, some arguing that self-defense laws should protect her if she truly felt threatened, others insisting that no one should die in front of a school under any circumstance. And in that silence, the story took on a haunting quality, one that made everyone watching ask how something so ordinary could unravel into tragedy so fast. Days passed, then weeks. The story of Romeca Meeks refused to fade. Each update, or lack of one, only raised more questions. People wanted answers. Was the shooting justified, or was it another life taken too easily? Police maintained their statement. The case was domestic in nature. It was being reviewed by prosecutors. But as more time passed, the meaning of those words began to weigh heavier. Behind those official phrases was a timeline of silence. No charges were filed against Quadajah Johnson. She remained free as investigators gathered evidence, reviewed footage, and compared statements. The gun was processed. The autopsy confirmed what witnesses had already said: a single gunshot wound to the face. The cause of death was clear. The circumstances weren't. In Chicago, the South Loop returned to its usual rhythm. The school reopened. Parents walked their children past the same block where it happened. The street was clean, the tape long gone, but the memory of that morning hung in the air like something unspoken. Detectives continued to piece together what led to the confrontation. There were suggestions of restraining orders filed at different times, though officials never confirmed them publicly. Online, conflicting narratives began to form. Some people sided with Johnson's claim of self-defense, others called it execution. But the police didn't fuel either side. They just kept collecting facts. Forensic investigators re-examined surveillance footage from nearby businesses, gas stations, apartment complexes, and traffic cameras. They were looking for clear visual proof of how the fight began, who made the first move, and how close Johnson and Meeks were when the gun went off. But even video doesn't always tell the full story. In domestic cases, every detail matters: the direction of movement, tone of voice, the distance between 2 people in a heated second. It's not always about who had a weapon, but whether that weapon was used as a last resort or the first response. That's what made this case complicated. Johnson told police she was attacked. She said she feared for her life. But witnesses described a brief struggle, one where Romeca might not have posed the level of threat required for lethal force. Some accounts even mentioned that Carlos Way, the man connected to both women, had physically intervened seconds before the gun fired. Yet, with testimonies clashing and emotions running high, proving intent wasn't simple. By late September 2025, no one had been charged. The Cook County State's Attorney's Office said the investigation was still active. That statement alone told the public that the facts weren't settled, that law enforcement was treading carefully between self-defense and homicide. For Romeca's community, it didn't matter how carefully the language was chosen. A woman was dead, a mother, and the image of her lying on that pavement near a school drop-off zone was something no one could forget. There's something unsettling about cases like this. They don't fit neatly into the categories people expect. There's no faceless villain, no random act of cruelty. It's a story of people who once shared the same circle, the same connections, and how a moment of emotion turned irreversible. Romeca's name joined the list of women whose lives ended at the hands of someone they knew, a list that grows quietly, one case at a time, behind the noise of daily news. And yet this one stood out for its setting. A school morning in broad daylight, where the line between love, anger and fear blurred in an instant. As weeks passed, the story of Romeca Meeks slowly slipped from the headlines, but it never really disappeared. It lived quietly in the spaces people didn't talk about, in the eyes of parents who now gripped their children's hands a little tighter at school drop-off, in the uneasy glances exchanged by neighbours who realised how fast a familiar face can turn fatal. Chicago police continued to classify the shooting as domestic. The investigation stayed open. Prosecutors reviewed the evidence, but no public announcement of charges came. That silence became its own kind of noise, one that left people asking what justice actually means in situations like this. Romeca Meeks didn't die in the dark. She didn't vanish without witnesses. She was killed in front of a school, in daylight, surrounded by people. Every detail was recorded: the time, the place, the weapon, the shooter. And yet, even with all that clarity, the truth still felt distant. Quadajah Johnson's claim of self-defense hung in the air like a shadow no one could fully escape. It forced the question: how do you measure fear in a single second? How do you decide who was the aggressor and who was just reacting to chaos? Because that's the thing about moments like this. They don't announce themselves. They start with words, then noise, then silence. A life can end before anyone realizes what's really happening. In the end, the story of Romeca Meeks became more than a crime scene report. It became a reminder of how fragile that line is between control and destruction, how emotion, when left unchecked, can rewrite everything in a blink. She was 31 years old. She had a son who watched her leave for school that morning and never saw her again. And all it took was one argument, one gun, 1 second. As of the most recent reports, there have been no official updates, no charges confirmed, no public statements closing the case. Just an unfinished story, one that continues to hang over Chicago like a question no one can quite answer. So maybe the real horror here isn't just the moment the trigger was pulled. Maybe it's the realization that something this devastating can happen between people who once knew each other, people who shared love, homes, and children. How does it reach that point? When does protection become aggression? And how do we ever really know what fear feels like in the mind of someone holding a gun? If this story made you stop and think, even for a second, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon so you don't miss the next episode. This is Roped Crimes, where we tell the stories that remind us how close the line between love and violence can really be.